I was never the biggest fan of Final Fantasy VII, but even I can admit that Square Enix just couldn't leave well enough alone. And how could we blame them? Fans wouldn't stop asking for more of Final Fantasy VII ever since it released. But the game had a feature-complete storyline back when it was just one game on 3 discs, but fans needed more, so Square started making up some really incomprehensible nonsense like the livestream giving people cancer, Hojo uploading his mind into the internet just before he died so he can possess someone, and giving a backstory to Cloud's giant sword. This series has received so much abuse at this point that it's a wonder how anyone can remain a fan of the Final Fantasy VII universe. So let's go through this compilation one by one, and keep in mind I'm not going to talk about the numerous dead mobile games that are impossible to play these days, like Before Crisis and that Dirge of Cerberus thing. I did play First Soldier before it was removed a year after it came out. I played for one match about a month after launch, and it was already against a team of mostly bots because nobody was playing the game anymore. Guess what? It sucked, and that's really all that needs to be said about the Final Fantasy VII mobile games. I just rewatched Advent Children for the first time in over a decade. I had to check if it was still terrible, and yeah, it is. It's the worst type of movie to talk about because it's so boring. It's one of those films where characters stand around talking for minutes at a time, and the conversation goes nowhere.
Look at you, you think you've got it so damn hard.
And the second half is this protracted fight scene that just won't end. And I can appreciate a good fight scene if it's live action with genuine stunt actors and no CG used, because you can tell that these guys are doing some seriously impressive stunts. Jackie Chan made a career out of this, and his films are enjoyable to watch even if you don't understand the story. Anyone can watch these movies, tune out, and just enjoy the action. But with Advent Children, not only do you not know what the hell is going on, but the fight scenes are just a blur of CG characters defying gravity and clashing swords. That can be fun for a few minutes, but Advent Children, it feels like the writer, this dumbass whose sole mission is to ruin everything he touches. Gave up after writing the first half of the movie and just stuffed the rest of it with pointless fight scenes, probably because even he couldn't stomach destroying this universe anymore. Mother! After the events of the original Final Fantasy VII, Sephiroth's genetic material corrupted the lifestream somehow, and anyone that came into contact with the lifestream contracted this incurable disease called geostigma that slowly kills you. Cloud contracted the disease, but no one else in the party did, and when he's not sending Tifa to voicemail or hallucinating about his dead girlfriend, he's riding around town as an Amazon driver because he runs his own delivery service. And now he's on speaking terms with the Turks who, dropped a plate in Sector 7 and killed thousands. And these Sephiroth clones appeared out of nowhere, a common plot point in this compilation, and are chasing after the remnants of Genova, who Rufus keeps in a small box while pretending to be handicapped. And for no reason he throws Genova out of a building, and one of the bad guys catches the box and slurps the Genova juice inside, which causes Sephiroth to manifest within his body. Like, why even bother going on about this? The entire story exists just to explain that Sephiroth is now immortal. Why couldn't Square just leave him dead? Why revive him? Was it not enough to neatly wrap up the story of Final Fantasy VII in one game? Did we need these sequels that overcomplicate everything? I thought it was a cool idea to give Vincent his own dedicated spin-off game, because he always felt like an important character that never had his time to shine. But the developers of Dirge of Cerberus had a fundamental misunderstanding on how to make an action game. These guys specialized in making RPGs, and it shows. You should never have more than half your runtime of an action game consist of cutscenes.
Pushed by soldier in red squad.
Today, Junior?
And you want to skip these cutscenes because the story is awful. Final Fantasy VII has received more abuse after its release than any other game in the series, with Square constantly stapling moronic addendums to its universe like the Shinra super soldiers who secretly lived underground for years without anybody knowing except like 3 people, and they all died so these guys were forgotten about. Square wasn't even trying to be subtle with this retcon. This is just some random asspull shoved in the game because we needed Shinra to be the villain again. We needed Hojo to be the main bad guy again. There's nothing original here. So after 3 years, somebody finally wakes up and gets the bright idea to open a door at the Shinra building where all these soldiers were trapped. And then military choppers swarm the city and start killing everyone, forcing Vincent out of retirement, and now the game begins. And right away you'll notice the invisible walls everywhere. You have a jump button, but there's barely any use for it. This is the combat. It's comprised entirely of auto-aim. I get it's a console shooter, but lock-on isn't even a toggle, it just happens automatically. There's no challenge here. Play on normal, play on hard, it doesn't matter. Hard mode is a joke. I imagine normal mode is barely any different. And the cutscene frequency is insane. They will not let you just enjoy the action. They need to constantly interrupt you every few steps with a cutscene. Yeah, it's a Square Enix game, walk down a hall cutscene. Fight off a wave of enemies cutscene, move an inch to the left cutscene. You can skip them at least, but even then, the frequent interruptions get irritating in just the first stage alone. Every little thing you do triggers a cutscene. The game flows like sludge. I just started this level, I took a few steps forward and got hit with a cutscene. And this part, there's 5 back-to-back cutscenes. Can we get back to the action? And the AI is moronic. They either run straight into you or they stay put and fire non-stop. And for variety's sake, here's a 2-minute Kate Sith stealth level for no reason. And do you actually need to sneak here? What do you think? In this part, you need to escort a kid across some rooftops and fend off snipers so he can open a door, so you can walk inside and grab a key card. But why can't the kid just give you the damn key so you can open the door yourself? Why do I need to escort him in the middle of a war zone? And look at the amazing enemy variety here too. Just stand back and shoot for every single one. There's no need to ever change up your approach. Even for the boss fights, look at the boss fights. You just circle strafe the entire time. When you complete a stage, you can either accept the accumulated experience to level up, or exchange it for money, which is used to upgrade your weapons, and that's pretty cool. You have a choice here. It's a pretty interesting system, and it doesn't matter at all. On hard mode, the game is a complete joke. It doesn't matter what your level is, or what you choose to upgrade. When the game handles all the aiming for you, who cares about this customization? Upgrading weapons has different variables like weight, and speed, and who cares? I only upgraded my starting handgun and had 0 issues. I was never incentivized to change my barrels, my equipped materia, use other guns, nothing. And that's basically it. If you haven't played Dirge of Cerberus, you probably heard it's this unplayable, irredeemable trash, but more than anything, the game is boring. Awful cutscenes and the shooting takes no thought, but it's playable. It's not the worst game ever made. Yeah, it sucks, but you've played worse. I've played worse. Oh man. During the PSP era, Square Enix had a nasty habit of producing really horrible prequels and sequels like Birth by Sleep, which ask you to play through the entire game 3 times with 3 different characters. The Third Birthday, one of the worst atrocities mankind has ever committed, and Crisis Core, a game designed to explain the backstory of how a character got his sword. And what's the point? We already know Zack's role in this story. We know that he dies. We know what caused Sephiroth to snap. What's the point on elaborating on any of this?
No way. He just ate my hair.
In terms of plot, there's nothing here that's necessary. If you just like to see character interactions, maybe you can get something out of this. But the characters unique to this game, Angeal and Genesis, they don't get any growth because they aren't present in the original Final Fantasy VII. So who really cares what happens to them? Square didn't care. These characters have no depth. Angeal exists solely to pass his sword to Zack. and Genesis exists to put Sephiroth down the path that made him the villain of this universe, but why? The appeal of Sephiroth in the original game was you didn't know if he was being mind controlled by Jenova or if he was just genuinely insane. Why do we need to erase that mysterious motivation with this garbage?
You were the greatest monster created by the Jenova Project.
There's no ambition here. This wasn't made because it was a good idea. It's just regurgitating the same scenes and plot points from the original game. What is new here? Zack rides atop a train and fights off soldiers in the very beginning. He falls through a roof and lands in Aerith's flower bed. You've got the confrontation with Sephiroth in the reactor. All of the plot points exclusive to Crisis Core, the Angeal and Genesis stuff, is awful. The game does try to elaborate a little bit on the war with Wutai, which was something never elaborated on in the original game, but the game does nothing with this plot point. Zack single-handedly infiltrates a fortress and kills waves of troops, and this somehow marks the end of the war. That's it. That's all you get. So why even bother? What does this have to do with anything? If you wanted to go into more depth on the war, go into depth! Don't just have it serve as this glorified tutorial for the game. Now, replaying this game surprised me because I didn't hate it when it first came out, and I always hated Dirge of Cerberus and Advent Children, but I can say with 100% certainty that Crisis Core is worse than Dirge of Cerberus. For one, you can't skip cutscenes, and it has just as many as Dirge, about 4 hours. And the level design is comparable to Dirge, just non-stop corridors where you fight the same enemies by hammering the exact same button over and over. But at least Dirge has seamless map traversal. You don't need to hear
activating combat mode
every few steps, and as brainless as the shooting is in Dirge, at least you can kind of tune out and just coast along with the game for a few hours and it's over. In Crisis Core, the combat is just as brainless, but now you've got unskippable reels and transitions in and out of battle. You can't even influence these reels, yet the game loves to waste your time by slowing them down for dramatic effect, pausing the action for this nonsense. It's such a slog to play this game because you spend so little time actually playing it, and when you do play it, there's barely anything of substance here. Combat involves just a single attack button. You can dodge and block attacks, but who cares? What does this matter? You can just stand around and the enemies will do nothing. Hard mode is unbearable. Look how long it takes to kill a single normal guy. Normal mode is so easy you don't even need to touch the controller. Where's the middle ground? You probably liked this game when you were a kid or a teenager when you first played it, but I promise you, it's so much worse than you remember. It's a typical Square game from this era. Flashy graphics, but it plays like liquid ass. You might be wondering why I didn't play the remake of this game, but why would I? It's the exact same god-awful story, and even if the combat flows a little better, you still have the awful slot machines that you can't control, and most of the combat is still just these horrible side missions where you kill generic enemies, so why would I waste money on this? Am I supposed to cut this game some slack because it was on the PSP? Why? A good game is a good game regardless of the platform it's released on. You could play the original Final Fantasy VII on the PSP in its entirety if you wanted to play Final Fantasy on the go. You could play Valkyria Chronicles 2 on the PSP, and it doesn't feel like a substantial downgrade from the first game, which was on the PS3. Crisis Core is a bad game not because it's on the PSP, but because it's a bad game. Before the remake release, Square teased fans by remaking the intro to Final Fantasy VII as a tech demo for the PlayStation 3. I guess Square has nothing better to do than waste their employees' times by having them produce these pointless tech demos.
Your realm and mine!
But this remake was the perfect opportunity to try and reset the Final Fantasy VII universe. Forget all these terrible spin-offs and just focus on retelling the original storyline. Instead, Square doubled down and made everything worse. I really ought to have known from the outset, since Midgard takes 4 hours to get through in the original game? Meanwhile with Remake, you need to slog through 25 hours of padding. The forced walking in this game is eye-gougingly obnoxious. Square, did not even try to disguise the insane, absurd amount of filler here. And surprise, surprise, Remake suffers from the exact same issue as all the other entries in the Final Fantasy VII universe. Lots of pointless elaboration on characters and events that didn't need further explaining.
Here's to awkward family reunions.
Yeah!
When the crew decides they want to blow up another reactor, instead of just, going there to blow it up, no, that's too simple. Jesse wants to build a weaker bomb, so you need to have this motorcycle chase minigame, and then you visit her parents' house to swipe a key card to enter a warehouse. Then you come across a closed door that isn't powered, and the only way to open the door is to divert power to it by turning off these gigantic sun lamps that light up the entire sector beneath the plate. These things that must be radiating insane amounts of heat to be able to light up an entire city a mile below like it's daylight outside. And you just casually walk on top of one without any sort of protective suit and shut it off to open a door. It takes as much energy to open a door as it does to power one of these enormous sun lamps. Why not just scale these crates stacked to the side and leap over the wall? Then you need to shut off 3 more of these to power an elevator. And why are the shutoff panels for the lights on top of the lights? Why can't you disable them from the power room? And look at the wall in the power room. There's an instruction manual with pictures, so even children can understand that you need to shut off these huge light bulbs to power a door and an elevator.
Gotta put out a sun just to open a gate, huh?
And if visiting the sewers for an hour wasn't bad enough, something that took, 2 minutes to get through in the original, you revisit the sewer again towards the end of the game because you can't just climb some walls to get to the Shinra Tower. No, you need grappling hooks, and only one guy has them, and he will not give them to you until you get your ass back in the sewer to do his dirty work. Then when you finally do get to Shinra headquarters, it's this elaborate dungeon that lasts like a quarter of the game, and it's packed to the brim with time-wasting nonsense because the game didn't have enough padding already. I'm all for variety. I don't mind minigames, but this platforming section doesn't have a failure state. You hold forward the entire time and all the jumping is automated. What is the point of this? It's a glorified walking segment. There are so many damn instances of forced walking in this game because the game wants to hold your hand through every little thing. It never gives you room to breathe. And yeah, the story has time-traveling ghosts with godlike powers that make sure nothing interesting happens. Barrett's killed, but the ghosts can't let that happen, so they revive him. Why even bother with this? Is the writer lashing out, wanting to change the story, but the director won't let him? And he's relaying his dilemma through the game? How hard was it to keep things simple and just retell the original story? What is with this compulsive desire to butcher this universe with this overcomplicated nonsense? Why the hell does Square still hire Nojima to write for their games? Hire a homeless man, have the janitor write the story, use anyone else, but stop ruining every single game with his awful writing.
Bullshit.
But I can forgive this game more than Crisis Core and Dirge of Cerberus because at least it's enjoyable to play. I'm not slobbering on the controller and steamrolling every fight. I know a lot of diehard fans had trouble getting over Remake replacing turn-based combat with real-time action, but I was fine with the change, and the boss fights in Remake are enjoyable. It's just a shame that you need to endure so much forced walking and these droning cutscenes and time-wasting activities that don't contribute to the plot, because all of this drags the pacing down. It's such a dull adventure to endure, which is a shame because it's also the only game with competent combat. We finally caught up with present day, where a new Final Fantasy VII gacha is out that nobody is playing and will disappear within a year, and Rebirth didn't meet Square's lofty sales expectations because too many people were burned by Remake. I was burned by Remake and skip Rebirth. I wasn't about to drop $70 on the continuation of a story that I hated. And hey, Nojima returned to write the story, so I already know it's gonna be nonsense. And it's pretty interesting to see so many people grow tired of this universe at this point, when 20 years ago fans couldn't get enough of it. Square butchered this series and nothing, not their movie, not their gachas, not the prequel, sequel, remakes, nothing comes close to the enduring charm of the original game.